So going down this weekend, we have UFC Fight Night Burns versus Morales. And in this video, I'm going to be giving you my full card breakdown along with a pick for every single fight on the card. And something about this card, man, and some of these matchups, while I'd like to see a lot of these fights on a pay-per-view or on a fight night with a crowd, because we have some really fun matchups on this card. And I actually think that we are going to see a lot of finishes come Saturday night. So I think we are in for a fun night of action. Let's hop into it straight away with the first fight of the night between Luana Pinheiro and Tecia Pennington. Look, this is a cut and dry matchup right here. Look, Tecia Pennington, she's been around for what seems like forever, right? She is a very well-rounded fighter. She can out-volume a lot of her opponents. She's a well-rounded fighter. She's kind of pick and poke on the feet, right? She doesn't have a ton of finishing potential, but what Tecia does have is a lot of experience on her side, and she has been in there with some really, really good fighters throughout her career. And one of the things that concerned me with Tecia not that long ago was, look, she had a couple fights and she was away for quite some time, and then we saw her come back to where, you know, she looked pretty solid against Mackenzie Dern a while ago, right? And again, it was a split decision, could have possibly went either way there. Then she came back after a long layoff and fought tooth and nail with Tabatha Ricci, who I've always said is overrated as Tabatha. But the bottom line, Tecia, I thought, won the fight, right? So again, you know, I think she won that, right? So that's a pretty good win there, even though she lost over Tabatha Ricci. And then she's coming off of a W over a former champion in Carla Esparza, to where, look, Luana Pinheiro, she's kind of had a little bit of a similar past several fights here because she's been in there with some really solid competition. She got the win over, you know, the veteran, the grizzled vet, Sam Hughes, and then she won a split decision over Waterson Gomes. Okay, Michelle, we saw kind of fizzle out towards the end, but these past three fights, while she's lost, look at the competition here. Got finished by Amanda Ribas, got subbed by Angela Hill, which that's not a great look. I know Angela Hill's kind of, she can pull off these upsets, but getting finished by Angela Hill, not a good look in my opinion. And then she got, lost by decision to Jillian Robertson, who we're seeing just seems like an absolute problem in the weight class. Look, Tecia Pennington, she has the volume on her side. I think that she's the better overall fighter. What does scare me is Luana has serious finishing potential. She's got power in her hands. She throws these big looping ooga booga shots to where if one of those lands, I could see her catching Tecia and finishing her, right? And she does have very good submissions as well. But I just don't know that's what happens, because I think outside of that, Pinheiro is a little bit low in terms of the volume. She does, like to flick the jab out there and kind of throw these lazy kicks out there. But I just struggle to see her outscoring Tecia Pennington over the course of 15 minutes. And if she can't find that finish, I just don't think that she does enough to be able to outscore Tecia. I'm going Tecia Pennington to get it done by decision. I think that Luana's going to need a KO. Moving on, we have Hyun-Sung Park versus Carlos Hernandez. This is an interesting fight here because at first glance, I'm like, look, Hyun-Sung Park, from what I've seen from him, coming off a nice finish victory over Shannon Ross, but the issue is I could KO Shannon Ross with a jab. Like, come on, man. Shannon Ross KOing Shannon Ross, like, that's not that impressive. I'm sorry. We saw it far too many times. And at one point, on the Contender Series, I'm like, Shannon seems like a solid fighter. And then he gets into the UFC and gets KO'd by everybody, right? So that's not super impressive. But what I like from Hyun-Sung Park is, look, he's well-rounded, man, and he's coming over from Road to the UFC, and look, we've seen when these guys come over from there, listen, Road to the UFC fighters are either super talented or they come over and they get checked really, really quickly. And there is a possibility that happens, right? Because, we saw him get the finish over Choi. We saw him go out there and KO Shannon Ross. And Park's very dynamic, right? On the feet, he's not, the most technical guy, but he fights at range well, can get into the pocket. He's got some solid boxing. And what I really like about him is he has a very solid ground game. He's got good jiu-jitsu skills. And I like the well-roundedness of Park. What scares me is Carlos Hernandez is a dog man. Like, I know that he is not a world beater, right? And he's had kind of this rocky road since coming off the Contender Series to where he earned a contract, right? By basically just showing the grit and the warrior spirit that he has, but it's just been up and down. Like, he got submitted by Nascimento, not a bad loss, right? Wins a decision here. Then he, gets finished by Tatsuro Taira. Again, really, really good opponent. Goes out there, loses to Ray Saruya. That's tough competition. And then he's coming off of a split decision win over Tumen Dembarel, right? So, and that fight, I don't know, man, right? It was very, very close. I could have seen how it could have went the other way. So Carlos Hernandez has solid boxing. He's got good grappling of his own. So I think that Park is the better fighter. That's my assessment, is Park is the better fighter. Where I get scared is we see these guys, man, when they're new in the UFC, especially a lot of these road to the UFC guys, they tend to break when they face someone with a gritty style. And I think that there is a real possibility that Carlos does that in this fight. And I actually think that there's a strong chance he does it in this fight, which sounds like I'm going to pick him, but I'm going to go Hyun-Sung Park, man. I'm going to go Park by decision here. I think it's going to be very hard to get Carlos Hernandez out of there, and I'm kind of, I guess, banking on the thought that Park is going to do enough to outscore him in 2 rounds and win those 2, to where even if he loses the 3rd, it's not going to mean much because he's already going to be ahead on the scorecards. But I think that the volume, the technicalities in the striking, while having a solid ground game of his own, is going to benefit Park in this fight. While I think Hernandez is very well-rounded and can turn it into kind of a dirty boxing type of fight, as long as Park avoids that and does not fatigue, because if he fatigues, he's gonna lose this fight. But I think that Park is solid. I think that he's very game. I think he's able to outpoint him and get it done. But again, this is a tough fight to call, in my opinion. I could very much see Carlos getting it done. Moving on, we have Denise Gomes versus Elise Reed. Weird fight here. Look, I think that Denise Gomes is clearly the better fighter. I think overall she's just better. I think that she has more power. I think her striking is better. She's got a solid ground game. But with Elise Reed, it's been kind of weird, right? Because throughout her career, it's kind of been this hot and cold, and especially in the UFC, right? She picked up a decision over Martinez, lost to Loma, but again, Loma's known for her Muay Thai skills. She got sub by her, so kind of weird there, right? And I know that Loma has gotten much better with the ground game. She's able to win another decision. She gets submitted by Lupi Godinez, and then she's coming off of a decision win over Jessica Panay, to where I'm like, what we've seen with Elise is she's just kind of there, right? She's got pretty solid boxing. It's kind of sloppy, but she's not a very good athlete, right? That's just the reality. She's not super explosive. She's not super powerful. It's just kind of like she's there, and she will continue to move forward. You will have to do something to keep Reed off of you, and that is the problem for Reed in this fight, because while I think Denise Gomes, there's a chance that if she goes out here and underestimates Reed, that she could find herself losing this fight, because I do think that Elise is very, very game, right? She has that going for her, and like I said, she's got decent boxing, but Denise Gomes is a unit, man. I mean, she is dangerous. She's got serious power. We saw that against Bruno Brazil. We saw that against Yasmin, and then, yes, she lost to Angela Hill, but we've seen how Angela Hill works against these up-and-coming prospects. She finds a way to just drag these fights out, and she just keeps the pressure on you and keeps the volume coming. She's like a Max Holloway, honestly, right? With the way that she's able to break these prospects, that's kind of just Angela Hill for you. But then she wins a split decision, and she's coming off of the win over Carolina, to where I'm like, look, Denise Gomes is very, very good. What concerns me is in this fight, if Elise Reed can turn this into some gritty, sloppy type of fight, maybe she gives herself a chance. But I think that Denise Gomes is just a better fighter. She's 25 years of age. She's really started to put some things together, and I think the finishes have started to slow down as she started to work her way up in competition here. But if we're asking ourselves, is this a step up in Elise Reed? Like, I think Elise Reed is very good, but I don't know that it's necessarily a step up. I think it's a solid opponent, but I think Gomes is the better overall fighter. I think that she wins no matter where the fight goes. I got Denise Gomes outscoring Elise Reed and winning a decision. Maybe she finds a finish, but I'll say decision. Moving on, we have Luana Santos versus Tainara Lisboa. Interesting fight here, because Lisboa is someone that I actually really like her fighting style, right? Before coming over to MMA, she, fought Valentina Shevchenko under Muay Thai rules, fought her in kickboxing. She didn't win any of them, right? She lost both of them to Valentina, but, still, again, that's Valentina Shevchenko way back in the kickboxing days, right? So, again, she's been in there with Shevchenko, which is pretty cool. She's got good Muay Thai skills, man. They call her the Thai Panther, and, she's got solid boxing on the feet. Her Muay Thai skills are excellent, and what we've seen from her overall skill set has really kind of started to come together, right? Because she's kind of had this inactive type of MMA career, but we saw, she has submission skills, and she's really started to develop that throughout her career after, almost 2 years ago by submitting Clark and then going out there and winning a decision over Oliveira. But here's the thing with Tainara in this fight. One of her losses in MMA was to Norma Dumont back in Jungle Fight, right? So again, Norma Dumont, we've seen how good she is. And so if I'm going off of that, since she's been in MMA, she's been pretty good, right? And on the feet, if you're going to stand in front of Lisboa in this division, at least in terms of the unranked competition, I think that she is far ahead a lot of these other strikers in terms of the technicalities, and I understand Luana Santos is coming off of a loss to Casey O'Neill, where Casey O'Neill, it's kind of like, man, I don't think that she's all that great, and yes, she stacked up some wins. She has some submission abilities. We know about the judo, and she does have good grappling, but is it good enough to trouble Lisboa? Maybe it is. I think that that's her path to victory, and I think on the feet, she could maybe land some good shots, but I think that from what we've seen from Santos in this fight, if she's on the feet with Lisboa, I think she's behind. I think the clean striking on the feet of Lisboa, she mixes in everything really, really well, and she's got the full arsenal on the feet. And like I said, very clean technical striking skills. And to me, when you're watching fighting, period, but especially in women's MMA, if you have a clear striking advantage in terms of the technicalities, and she just doesn't get taken down and held down by Luana or submitted, I think Lisboa outscores her and wins this fight, to be honest with you. And we've seen that Lisboa has improved in terms of the grappling. Now, had she faced anyone on the, over these past few years that is of, the status in terms of the grappling as Santos, I don't think so, but I don't think Luana is just that much better than Lisboa. Maybe she proves me wrong, but I think that Tanara goes in there and outstrikes her and wins a decision. I got Lisboa getting this one done. I think she's very fun on the feet. Moving on, we have Connor Matthews versus Yadir DelValle. I butchered that probably, but listen, look, man, this fight to me, this is interesting actually, because look, Connor Matthews at one point, it was like, okay, Connor Matthews goes on the Contender Series, loses to Francis Marshall, and then it was like we kind of almost dismissed it because Francis has looked pretty good throughout his UFC career, right? He arguably won his last fight against Mairon Santos, who's on this card and a super talented prospect. Then he kind of had to go rack up, a win, comes back, wins on the Contender Series, and he's been 0-2 in the UFC here recently by getting finished to Dennis Buzukja. When I saw that, I'm like, all hope is gone for Connor Matthews, man. I mean, this guy's training out of the New England cartel. He's got Rob Font, he's got Calvin Kattar, and it feels like he should be so much better than what he is. And look, when you're getting finished by Dennis Buzukja, that's a horrible look. I never thought that Dennis was UFC caliber. Then he goes out there and gets brutally starched by a dangerous prospect, to be fair, in this weight class in Jose Delgado. So that one, I saw that coming a mile away, but Connor Matthews is chinny, man. We've seen that. And these guys that are UFC caliber, they can land on his chin and put him out. And I think in this fight, he's going to need to get this fight to the floor because with Yadir, this dude's dangerous, man. He's a dangerous man. He's got serious power. He's, southpaw. And, the thing about him, though, he is really wild on the feet, dude. Really wild on the feet. He gets real ooga booga. He gets real loopy. He gets real wild. And that concerns me a little bit because I'm like, look, I don't think Connor Matthews is some sort of world beater, but I see the scenario to where he can time a takedown off that. He can throw some good clean shots down the middle, beat those looping punches, get in on his hips and take him down and maybe control him. But then when you go back and watch the tape on Yadir, you see that this guy has really good submission skills, man. He is very, very good on the ground from what we've seen. Again, how's that going to look against a UFC guy and Connor Matthews? That's going to be the question. But he submitted Adam Smith over in Fury, and then he's coming off of, the Dana White Contender Series victory to where I don't like how wild he is on the feet. He's going to pay for that at some point. Is it this fight? I don't think so. Connor Matthews doesn't have devastating power. His grappling, yes, takedowns are good and his wrestling's okay, but from there, I just don't think that he's that much of a threat to Yadir in this matchup. I'm going to go Yadir by finish in this one. I think that he finds a finish in this fight. I'm going to say in the second round. I think that there's a chance that he submits Connor Matthews if the fight hits the floor because he does have good submission skills. But I think it's going to come by way of reversing a position, landing some good ground and pound, and getting the ref to stop in. Or maybe he lands one of those big, wild, winging ooga booga shots on the feet. But I just think it's going to come by, he gets top position. Connor Matthews tries to initiate the grappling because we've seen on the feet, Connor Matthews, if you clip him on the chin, man, this guy's going down. So I think that Yadir is up to par with someone like a Dennis Buzukja, not Jose Delgado. Delgado's a monster, but I think he's on par with someone like a Dennis Buzukja. I think Yadir is able to get a finish in his UFC debut over Connor Matthews. Moving on, we have Jared Gordon versus Thiago Moises. Interesting fight here, right? Two guys that for as young as Thiago Moises is at only 30 years of age, he is a veteran in the UFC, man. He has been in there with the who's who. Islam Makhachev gave him a pretty solid scrap back in the day. You know, Bobby Green. I mean, he's been in there with everybody, right? And he was in there. And this win, by the way, I said this a while ago, this win was going to age very well after he was able to submit Melquizael Costa. Got finished by Benoit Saint-Denis, which that concerns me because we've seen how big of a bust BSD has been. But then he goes out there, finishes Mitch Ramirez, loses to Ludovic Klein by decision. Again, Klein, I think, is still a very game opponent. Then he comes off of a win over Trey Ogden, to where Ogden's a tricky opponent because of his length, because of his reach, and he's just kind of a hard stylistic guy to deal with. And look, Moises is super game, man. Training over an American Top Team. He's very physically strong. He's got very good grappling, excellent submission skills, and on the feet, I think he's pretty good, right? I don't think his boxing or anything is like outstanding, but it's serviceable. It's pretty good. And I think that's something that he's added into his game that I think is going to help him a lot in this fight, is those calf kicks, is the low kicks that we've really started to see him utilize quite a bit more throughout his career, which again, he's been around for so long. In American Top Team, they are really known for targeting the low kick, whether it's the calf kick, you know, just anything low, that is what they are targeting in terms of the kicking game. And I think that that's going to help him in this fight because Jared Gordon, it's kind of like we're all hanging on to this right here a while ago where it was like, oh, he beat Paddy Pimblett. Okay, but you know, he technically did, right? When you watch it, it looks like he did, but on the scorecards, he lost, right? So robbery or not, he lost the fight. And then before that, he was able to beat Santos. But again, he's just been wildly inactive, right? He finished Mark Madsen, and it's like, okay, like Madsen had some moments, but he never was really all that great. And then he's coming off of a decision loss to Nasrat Haqparast almost a year ago, which Nasrat is a very, very good striker on the feet. He's kind of rangy and all those kinds of things. So a little bit of a hard fight for Jared Gordon. The bottom line is this. Look, Jared Gordon's almost 37 years of age. He's been around for a really long time. Outside of the Paddy Pimblett fight, over his last 5, he's been inactive. And anytime we see fighters inactive, two things are going on. To me, you're kind of rusting away, or you come back and maybe you've evolved. I don't think at this point in his career, Jared Gordon has evolved at all. I'm going Thiago Moises to get this one done by decision. Maybe he finds a finish in there. Maybe he finds a submission. But either way, I think Moises wins this fight. He is a very, very solid fighter. He's been in there with some really good competition. He's been pretty active. And I like what we have seen from Thiago. He's someone that while he's 30, while he's been in the UFC for a while, we have seen him making improvements throughout his career. I like Thiago Moises in this fight. And I like Jared Gordon. I think he's always fun. And again, it seems like, you know, in that Paddy Pimblett fight, I mean, it's like the Dominic Reyes versus John Jones situation to where Jared kind of just got hung up on that a little bit. And I did think he won that fight, to be fair. But at the end of the day, he didn't. And I think Thiago Moises gets this one done. I just think Moises is the better overall fighter here. Moving on, we have Mateus Camilo versus Gabe Green. Interesting fight here because Gabe Green, he was just kind of a blocky unit up at 170 pounds, and now he is coming down to 155 pounds, which to me just smells like a bully coming down in weight because things weren't going well in your weight class, dog. No, listen, man, listen. Gabe Green's a solid opponent, right? He goes out there, loses to D-Rod 4 years ago, beat Phil Rowe, goes out there, gets another finish victory, loses to Ian Machado Gary, gets finished brutally by Brian Battle, and then he's like, listen, man, I'm going to go down and try to bully around the lightweights. And he's welcoming in a brand new fighter into the UFC who has an interesting little storyline, right? Because this guy, Nabatov, he was on, I believe at the press conference for UFC 308. He called his shot. He's like, Dana, sign me, man. I want to be in the UFC. And they actually showed up, I believe, to watch him fight. And he took on Mateus Camilo to where Camilo was able to go out there, impress the UFC, and get the job done. So he is the one that actually got signed. So again, going out there, taking advantage of the spotlight and pulling that one off, I think that's given this guy some confidence. And what I've seen from Camilo going back and watching the tape, this guy's dangerous, man. He has outstanding jiu-jitsu skills. He's dangerous on the feet. He has good power. And I like his versatility in terms of finding finishes, whether it's knocking somebody out, whether it's
finding a submission when the fight hits the floor. I like his dynamic skill set, man. Like I said, he does go to some decisions, so it's kind of hard to really predict exactly how a Camilo fight is going to go. But I don't like when things aren't going your way in the weight class that you're in, and you're like, I'm just going to go down a weight class and try to bully those guys around. That almost never works out. Maybe there's a few cases out there that someone can remind me of. That usually doesn't work out. We see it all the time where these fighters do that. They're like, oh, it's not going well for me at welterweight, so I'm going to drop down to lightweight and try to beat up on the little guy. Yeah, Mateos is going to be a lot faster. He's more dangerous than Gabe Green. I know Gabe Green's a big guy. Maybe his power translates, and I could be wrong here. I don't think so. I think Mateos Camilo is able to finish Gabe Green, whether it's a knockout, whether it's a submission. I see him finding a finish in this fight. I don't like the idea of Gabe Green going down a weight class. This smells to me like his UFC stint is coming to an end whenever we see that desperation of dropping a weight class. Again, we've seen fighters do it, like Buckley, where they're doing okay in a weight class, then they drop down and they just take off. But that's one thing compared to things aren't just looking good in the weight class. That's like, shit, I might get cut. I'm going to drop down out of desperation. Never like when fighters do that. That's what I sense here. I'm going Camilo by finish here. I think he gets it done. Moving on, we have a very interesting fight here between Julian Erosa, Juicy J, baby, and Melquizael Costa. I really like this fight, dude. I really like this fight because both of them are riding a 3-fight win streak coming into this, and they both have had some interesting kind of ups and downs throughout their career. Julian Erosa is someone that it was kind of like he's got a lot of wins, right? But he's got some L's, and it's like something wasn't clicking with Juicy J, right? We saw that a while ago. He got finished by Alex Caceres. Then he got finished again by Fernando Padilla, and it's like, it's not awful competition, but there was some questions about, is this the end of Juicy J, right? That's kind of how I was feeling. I'm like, is this guy going to be the same, right? Because he's getting up there in age, and, at this time he was 33, but whenever you hit that kind of point, it's like, are guys going to improve? Are they going to get better when you've already been around for a while, already have a ton of fights under your belt? He comes back and submits Ricardo Ramos. I thought that was very, very impressive to go out there and finish Ramos like that. Then he submits Christian Rodriguez. C-Rod, that's a solid win, right? Going out there and getting a submission. Then he goes out there and just completely obliterates Darren Elkins, which Elkins had no business being in there. Should have just retired. I mean, that fight, it should have never been sanctioned, man. Darren Elkins looked like complete dog shit in that fight. And I mean, Julian was never in any danger. Just marched him down, hands were at his hips, had zero respect for anything that Elkins was going to do. And look, Juicy J's a solid opponent, man. He's got solid submissions. He's a pretty solid grappler. And on the feet, we've seen some improvements. But what I do not like about Erosa, his hands have gotten low, his chin is there, and he is able to be tagged. And I think in this fight, that's a problem. Because I think Melquizael Costa, who, he got starched by Steve Garcia, Garcia is an interesting fighter, man, in the weight class because he has that thunderous one-shot KO power to where if you get clipped at any point in the fight, he can knock anybody out. But he goes out there, he gets a submission victory, subs Andre Fili in Seattle, and then comes out there and beats C-Rod by decision. And look, I know you MMA math. It's like Erosa sub C-Rod, and Melquizael Costa couldn't do that. Styles make fights, man. Styles make fights, and I think in this matchup, look, Melquizael Costa, he's an interesting fighter to me. I really like watching him fight. He's got outstanding jiu-jitsu skills, and on the feet, he's got this Muay Thai-like style that's like very dynamic. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like Anderson Silva. I'm not saying he's Anderson Silva, but it's this elusive, very diverse kicking arsenal. And I think he said before he really got into martial arts, he was just kind of teaching himself how to strike. So that kind of explains the creativity on the feet. And I think Costa wins this fight, man. I actually think that he wins this fight, and I'm going to say by submission. I know that that's bold, man. I know that that's bold. I'm going to say maybe he finds a submission at some point in the third round because, look, Juicy J's there to be hit. I could very much see Mel Costa tagging him and knocking him out. I could see, Erosa maybe catching Costa with a shot. I don't like how low Juicy J's hands are. And when you're in there against a very good kicker like Mel Costa, a guy that has very good submission skills to where if you get dropped, you're in a world of trouble. It's that Charles Oliveira-like effect that I feel with Melquizael Costa to where if you get hurt on the feet, you know that so he's jumping on a limb and going to find a way to get you out of there. I like Mel Costa in this fight. Maybe finds a finish even earlier. I think maybe round 3 is a little bit too late here, but I'm just kind of guessing with that one. But listen, either way, I think Mel Costa finds a finish in this one, whether it's a KO or a submission. I like Melky getting this one done. I'm high on this guy, man. I think he's a ton of fun. Moving on, we have Nursulton Ruziboev versus Dustin Stoltzfus. Listen, man, if you've been watching the channel, you know that I am all aboard the train of Ruzi, man. Nursulton Ruziboev, and he's someone that I've said, listen, if he stays at 185 pounds, we are looking at a dangerous contender in the middleweight division. And I never understood why he was spending time at welterweight. I have no idea how he was even making 170 pounds. To me, it was almost like how Pinheiro was making 185. I'm like, how are you even making the weight class? And it has to be in some way, shape, or form hindering your performance. I mean, to be 6'5" with a 76-inch reach, cutting down to 170 pounds, I just couldn't believe he was even making the weight class. I thought it was detrimental the entire time, but there is no question that Nursulton Ruziboev is a very, very dangerous opponent, man. He is long and rangy. He has sniper-like striking skills, devastating, legit power in his hands, very, very dynamic on the feet. And when it comes to the grappling, guys like to try to take him down, and you got to be careful. He has excellent jiu-jitsu skills, and what we've seen, since coming into the UFC, he was able to finish Bruno Ferreira. We know how dangerous Bruno is, so that was an excellent victory right there. Goes out there, finishes Mr. Crime Committer out here, Cedricus Dumas, and then he goes out there and loses to Joaquin Buckley. But again, that was at welterweight, and we've seen Buckley has been an absolute menace down to 170 pounds. Then he goes back up to middleweight and brutally finishes Eric McConico at UFC Seattle. I like everything about Ruzi, man. I am all aboard the train. I think that he is going to be a serious problem inside the middleweight division. Again, hate him at welterweight, keep him at middleweight. I think he could go on a run there. And look, Dustin Stoltzfus' game. He's a very, very solid opponent. If he can take Ruziboev down, get into top position, get into mount, get into, a top position, I think that he could cause Ruziboev some problems, because while I think Ruzi does have good submissions, you don't want to be underneath Dustin Stoltzfus to where he could start to rain down some of that brutal ground and pound, because what we've seen from him, he got finished by Abus Magomedov, went out there, got a submission victory over Soriano, got brutally finished by Bruno Ferreira, but he's coming off of a nice KO victory over Marc-Andre Barriault, to where we saw, man, you have got to watch whenever the fight hits the floor with Stoltzfus. He's got some nasty ground and pound when the fight hits the floor, but at the end of the day, I don't think this fight hits the floor, and if it does, he's got to watch out for the submission skills of Ruzi, man. I like Nursulton Ruziboev to get a first-round KO in this fight. I think that Dustin Stoltzfus has the perfect style for Ruziboev. I think that Dustin's going to try to get in his face, try to make it a dirty type of fight, because the clean striking advantage is clearly on the side of Nursulton, in my opinion. So, yes, Stoltzfus has power. Yes, he's capable of landing a shot, or if he's able to take Ruzi down, land some good ground and pound, I just don't see it happening. I think Ruziboev brutally knocks him out. I'm going Nursulton Ruziboev by first round finish. I'm high on Ruziboev, man. Moving on, we have a very interesting matchup here between Sodiq Yusuff and Mairon Santos. I've went back and forth on this one, man. I've went back and forth on this because a long time ago back at Shogun Fights, I actually watched Sodiq Yusuff fight. He knocked some guy out, did the little shimmy shake, and I met him at the MGM down when a Shogun event was taking place. Super cool dude, man. Super fun fighter to watch. Dangerous power in his hands. And I've always said he was part of probably my favorite Dana White Contender Series fight of all time, when him and Mike Davis went to absolute war. That was one of just the best fights I think I've ever seen, honestly, not just Contender Series fights. And he's just someone that it feels like it just hasn't worked out the way we kind of were hoping or thinking it could in the UFC, because Sodiq Yusuff, he's got a decent ground game, right? Decent wrestling, pretty good jiu-jitsu, but in terms of the striking, He can knock just about anybody out if he lands clean, but it just hasn't looked particularly the way I thought it would in the UFC. I'm like, Sodiq's this power unit, man. He's going to move forward. He's big, he's strong, and, he's shorter, but he's got, crazy power in his hands. And if he lands, I feel like he could knock anybody out, and it just hasn't looked that way since he's been in the UFC, right? He went out there and he got kind of beaten around by Arnold Allen. He got, wins a decision over Alex Caceres, submits Don, and then he, loses to Edson Barboza after almost knocking out Edson Barboza. But then after that, he got completely picked apart by Edson Barboza. And let's be honest, that Barboza at that time, that's not a prime Edson Barboza. So that's what kind of concerned me a little bit. Then he goes out there and just gets completely ran over by Diego Lopez at UFC 300. But again, that's Diego Lopez, right? So again, top of the food chain in the weight class. And then Mairon Santos, he was coming off a tough, right? And we know that he's training over at Extreme Couture. He's got a good camp, and, he got the finish over Con Ofley, and, he's looked like a pretty solid fighter, right? And he goes out there, and I thought he lost this fight to Francis Marshall, and I picked Santos to win the fight, but you go back and you look at the striking totals, and it's like, maybe it's not so crazy that Santos won the fight, but I still think Francis Marshall won. Look, I think Mairon Santos is the cleaner, more technical striker, without question. I think that if he sits at the edge at range, I think he can bang leg kicks all day long because he's got some good ones. He's got good speed on him. He's got good, rangy boxing from the outside. But look, this is going to be at lightweight. And I know that Santos, I think he was expressing, wanting to move up to 55. Sodiq Yusuff is been a featherweight. So it's kind of interesting that this is at lightweight. So we have questions, right? Does Santos look better because he's up a weight class and he's not as drained? Or does he, Yusuff look so much better because he's not as drained and he's already a super powerful guy? So I think that that's something interesting to factor into this. But I think that, listen, yes, it was a close fight with Francis Marshall, and that does concern me to where I thought about picking Sodiq to win this, man. I really did, because I see a scenario where Yusuff can win. He can land a big shot and hurt him and get him out of there. But when does that really happen for Sodiq? While it feels like it should, it just doesn't happen a lot, right? Is he going to push Santos up against the fence? Is he going to take him down and control him? Like, I know Francis Marshall is maybe not as good as Yusuff, but I don't think that Yusuff is a better grappler necessarily than Marshall, right? And I think Francis Marshall is really underrated. So I think if Mairon Santos can keep this on the feet, he's training at Extreme Couture, Coach Eric Nixick and those guys, they're gonna stay on this young man in Santos. They're gonna fine tune some things, and I think coming into this, they're gonna fight a smart, technical fight in this matchup, and I think that he finds a decision victory in this fight. I think he's able to outscore Sodiq Yusuff to where maybe Yusuff can win minutes up against the fence. Maybe he lands some big shots that hurt Santos and can take a round or two in there and maybe pull it off. But I just don't see it. I think that Mairon Santos, again, styles make fights. I don't think that Yusuff has the same style as Francis Marshall. And again, that was the big debut for Mairon Santos, to where I always give fighters a little bit of a pass because I don't think that we always see fighters show us who they exactly are in that debut. I'm going Mairon Santos to get this one done. So I'm going to put some trust in him here. But again, I could definitely see Sodiq Yusuff, giving him that reality check since coming into the UFC for Santos. But I think that Mairon is able to outstrike him on the feet and get this one done. So again, this would be a huge win for Mairon Santos because Sodiq Yusuff is a name. He's someone that's, been in the rankings before. Big opportunity here for Mairon Santos. I think he's able to get it done. Moving on, the co-main event, we have Paul Craig versus Rodolfo Bellato. Really odd fight, man, because I think Rodolfo Bellato kind of sucks. I think he kind of sucks, man. Like, I know he's 12-2-1, and, he's this big, scary-looking Brazilian. He's got the tattoos. He's kind of yoked, and he throws these big winging shots, and he trains a little with Alex Pereira. He's got that long guard. He's throwing those calf kicks out there without turning the hips all the way over, and ooh la la, right? It kind of looks a little fancy. This guy went out there and, in my opinion, looked like dog shit against Jimmy Crute. A Jimmy Crute that hadn't won a fight in forever. A Jimmy Crute that retired and decided to come back because, it's in Australia. And Rodolfo Bellato, to me, looked like shit. He just did, man, and I don't like what we've seen from Bellato. I know that he finished Ior Potieria. I know that he got a finish on the Contender Series, and before that in LFA, like, he was showing that he's a dangerous fighter. He's super wild and super reckless, to where I think at some point he is going to pay in this division for being not responsible defensively, just winging these wild shots all the time and all those kinds of things. But let's be real. He's in here against Paul Craig, who, when's the last time Paul Craig has won? He won almost 2 years ago against Andre Muniz, who we've seen just is not the same fighter anymore. After getting completely obliterated by Ikram Aliskerov, we just have not seen Andre Muniz look good in quite some time, which credit to fighters like Ikram Aliskerov, because again, he has been fighting some tough opposition as Muniz. But Paul Craig's going back to light heavyweight here. It's like, well, I went to middleweight and things have just been absolute dog shit because he got submitted by Brennan Allen, gotten brutally KO'd by Caio Borralho, and then he's coming off of a decision loss to where he got outstruck by Bo Nipple. I mean, so again, Bo Nickel on the feet looked a little bit better than what I think people want to give him credit for on the feet in that fight. But if you're getting outstruck by Bo Nickel, you're getting outstruck by Bellato. You are, and outside of the chance that somehow Paul Craig pulls guard, this fight ends up on the floor and him throwing up some sort of Hail Mary triangle off of his back, which again, Bellato, from what we've seen, at least I've seen on tape, has competent enough jiu-jitsu and ground skills to hopefully not get caught, because again, Paul Craig has victories over Magomed Ankalaev and over Jamal Hill, which is just fucking wild to me. But at the end of the day, Bellato KOs Paul Craig. I think he KOs him in the first round. Maybe we see this get drug out. Craig gets the fight to the floor, pulls off a submission. I just think that that's what he's banking on, is him getting his ass beat, Bellato getting tired, making a stupid mistake and getting submitted. But I think at this point in his career, didn't work out at light heavyweight, dropped down the middleweight, wasn't working out there. He's going back up to light heavyweight. He was getting tagged at middleweight. Imagine what happens when he gets hit by a true light heavyweight at this point in his career. I think Bellato starches Paul Craig in this matchup. But again, with Bellato being such a big favorite, man, I still could see people sleeping on Craig. And again, we all know that if you fall into the guard of Paul Craig, especially late in the fight, it's that GM3 effect to where he could be getting his ass beat, but pull it off in the final round or something like that. But at the end of the day, I think Bellato starches Paul Craig and gets it done. Not because I think Bellato's that good. I think that he's going to get completely knocked out sooner or later in the light heavyweight division. But for now, he still keeps the train rolling. Moving on to the main event, we have Gilbert Burns versus Michael Morales. This is one of those fights, man, that is... I just wince. I go, every time we see fights like this get booked, it makes me want to cry, dude. It makes me want to cry, dude, because Gilbert Burns is an OG at this point. He's almost 39 years of age. At one point, he was an elite welterweight, challenged Kamaru Usman for the title, and he's been around for forever. He's got really good jiu-jitsu skills, and although we haven't seen a ton of that inside the UFC, at times we have, right? We've seen that he's got these big winging ooga-booga shots to where if he can land them, he can knock anybody out. But the reality is, Gilbert Burns has not knocked anybody out or submitted somebody in a long time. The last time he got a finish was over 2 years ago against Neil Magny. So again, it's been a while since we've seen Burns finish somebody. He, won a decision over a washed Jorge Masvidal, was 1 foot in and 1 foot out, goes out there, gets outworked by Bilal Muhammad, gets finished by Jack Della Maddalena, which he was kind of winning the fight, right? So again, I feel like that hasn't aged too terribly. Then he goes out there and gets completely dominated by Sean Brady. But from what we've seen from Sean Brady, especially what we just saw him do to Leon Edwards, not an awful loss. But at the end of the day, man, Gilbert Burns is 39. He hasn't finished anybody in a long time. He's in a 5-round fight here, which does play to his advantage because he's going up against a young guy and Michael Morales, who's 25, almost 26. I said a long time ago, Michael Morales has the X factor. He has that thing. He is a dark horse prospect, or just a dark horse whatever, or prospect on the rise in this weight class that I think is going to be at the top of the heap, competing against these tough guys inside of what is a stacked welterweight division at this point in time. Because Michael Morales, he's really kind of growing up in the UFC here, right? He's been in here since he was, low 20s. I mean, he's been in the UFC for a while, and he's growing up right before our eyes, finishing Trevin Giles, finishing Adam Fugit, winning a decision over Max Griffin, winning a decision over Jake Matthews, and then went out there 8 months ago and starched Neil Magny. Look, Michael Morales is super dangerous, man. Super well-rounded, really good leg kicks, really good striking, excellent boxing. He has a good ground game. We haven't seen too much of it since he's been in the UFC. But if you go back and watch before the UFC, if you see some training footage, I think that this guy has a solid ground game. Outside of Gilbert Burns landing a big ooga-booga shot at some point, a big sweeping left hook, big winging right hand, or, ending up on the floor and, catching Michael Morales in some sort of submission. I think that this is basically the end of Gilbert Burns, man. I hate when we see these kinds of fights, but it's part of the fight game to where we see these guys who are once elite, once a fan favorite type of fighter. They get fed to an up-and-coming prospect to test them and to ultimately allow the prospect to build their name. Man, this is going to suck, but I think Michael Morales finds a finish over Gilbert Burns in the middle rounds. I don't think it's in the first. I don't think it's, maybe in the second. I could see in the third, fourth round, we see Michael Morales land a shot on Gilbert Burns, hurt him, follow him to the floor, land some shots to where the ref has to step in and stop this fight. It's going to be hard to see, man, because I hate seeing guys like Gilbert Burns who are just super cool dudes, have been around for a while, competing for titles, fighting who's who, and now they get fed to the up-and-coming prospects to where if you beat Gilbert Burns in this division, we have seen that will get you into a prime position for not necessarily a title shot, but basically one more fight, and you could find yourself in a title position. So I think that Michael Morales gets a finish over Gilbert Burns, then finds himself in what could be a title eliminator next. Michael Morales is the full package, man. He's dangerous, he's fast, he's sharp, he's super skilled, super young as well. I think he's got the X factor. I'm all in on Michael Morales, man. I have been for a while. I think that he has been one of the most dangerous prospects on the rise, especially in what is now a stacked welterweight division. Enter the name Michael Morales into the top tier of the welterweight division. I think it starts and stops with a finish over Gilbert Burns this weekend. It's going to be hard to watch, man, because I really like Gilbert Burns, but can't pick with my heart, man. Got to pick with my brain. I really like Michael Morales. I think he gets a finish victory over Gilbert Burns this Saturday. But if you guys enjoyed this video, do me a favor. Please give it a like. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. And turn on the notification bell so you do not miss an upload. I would appreciate it. See you next time.